I'm curious, right from the start, how many people in this room would call themselves a gamer? Nice. Okay, we're going to be among friends then. I also would be curious, if you call yourself a gamer, what is it that you... Can you turn this one down a little bit? It's ringing on these back speakers. Can you do that from here? No? Okay. I'll put it lower. What kind of games are you playing? Please, just shout out.
Alan Wake.
Nice. Okay. Alan Wake. Anybody else?
Walking Dead.
Walking Dead, yeah.
Skyrim.
Skyrim. Okay.
Delta.
What's that one?
Delta.
Delta, okay. We've got quite a range in here. So why are you playing Alan Wake? What do you like about it?
I like the graphics, they were beautiful. I like the scenery.
Okay.
And the feeling of, it reminds me of Twin Peaks. That was my favorite.
Has anyone else played Alan Wake? By the way, I'm playing this right now, so I'm kind of really into it myself. The other one I thought that's interesting to call it is Skyrim. You mentioned that. Now, this is a game I hate, but I've played it for probably 50 hours. So tell me a little bit about why you play that. What is it about it?
Well, once you get to past the idiocies of the original game design, it actually lets you set your own goals. And it lets you engage in simulation of a world, rather than play a straightforward game. Because it's rather poor at being a straightforward game.
I agree. But that latter part, I think, is really interesting. You move into a point where you set your own goals within it.
Yes. And I'm 1,150 hours in.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay, so you've entered into kind of expertise in that one. What was the one from the back, the game that was mentioned? What?
Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. Has anyone else played Walking Dead yet? Are you playing it on the PC or on the mobile?
PC.
Okay, what is it about this game that's interesting to you?
It's one of the very few games that have actually touched me on an emotional level.
So I like this place to start, actually. I was going to be talking specifically about place and place-based games. I think this is going to lead into that and follow up more as a conversation with what Nicola was presenting. We've had some conversations about kind of studying games and the scholarship around games and the scholarship around games and learning. For a moment, I decided it might be kind of fun to switch into, I design games for a living, and it might be fun to look at what about the design of games we can learn from. I think the way games are made teach us a lot about teaching, teach us a lot about learning. And this is not my idea, certainly, this is a big field, but I will be borrowing specifically from one scholar named James Gee. That's G-E-E. He was a professor at the University of Wisconsin, where I'm currently at, but then he moved to Arizona State, and he's kind of been on the road for quite a while now. But he did a really amazing thing with his first book on games. And that is, he didn't judge them. Just for 1 minute, he said, why are people playing games? And he watched his son and his grandson play games and pulled out the things that made them so good at what they did. Does that make sense? He just suspended or waited to judge and instead tried to learn what they were good at. So I'm going to try to mimic that a little bit by telling a few stories, and we're going to look at some games during this time. I'll tell you where I started was this, and I would consider this the problem. Has anyone taken an art history course? Just show of hands, I'm curious. Have you studied art history? Oh, only one. How many people in this room would say that they know something about art history, or they go to art galleries, or... Okay, so now we're starting to get a little bit more interaction, a little bit. I'm not the kind of person that normally goes to galleries, but I did take an art history course. And I saw something that was really disgusting, something that was really just gross about the way art history is taught. And the way that art history was taught was something that could be reduced to this. We could take an entire conversation between artists and community, within history and politics, within visual representation and beauty, and we could reduce it to something that could be put on a flip card. There's a photo, and on the backside, the author, the genre, the year, repeat. And you watch all the students in Wisconsin study for their art history exam going through flip cards. And that idea that we could take something as precious to us as art history, the conversation of who we are, and reduce it to flip cards totally disgusts me. And that's probably where I got started with games, was this idea. And the first prototype I made was our art history prototype. It was responding to Andy Warhol and trying to teach art history through story. The idea was that art history is something that can be taught by meeting the artist, by being part of their world and by playing and getting to know them. So the practical idea, and this is where we get into some of my work with augmented reality, is you're in this gallery and you're looking at this thing and you don't know anything about it. So why don't we put Andy Warhol in the room with you and get to know him and do some quests for him and help him make his painting. So the first prototype looked like this. This is old, obviously. It's this old pocket PC device, and we made a game out of interacting with these pop art artists. And it didn't work very well, but it was very promising. So from there, I think, is where I got started in games. Now, I work at a university and I make games for university courses, and I find that people, when they hear the word game, they think silly or funny, but they don't think about anything that could be educational. Now, we already do this, like we understand simulations, and I'm gonna be getting on an airplane tomorrow, and I guarantee that I'd rather that my pilot learned how to fly on one of these multi-million-dollar simulations than by reading this book. By the way, the flames do not make me more, oh, they're clouds. They look like a burning plane to me. And I also would rather that my doctor learned on a multi-million-dollar simulator like this instead of in a lecture hall learning about cutting. It's just, we know this instinctually. We know that simulation is good. So I think we can start there in any good discussion about games, because I think it's safe to say that at the heart of every game is a simulation. At the heart of every game is a representation of the world that can be explored. So here's some things that we can learn from games. Let's start here, World of Warcraft. How many people have played this? What, about a third or so? And you're in good company. Last time I checked, there were around 20 million active players in World of Warcraft. This is a very big and complicated game, and a number of researchers have been studying the kinds of things that happen in World of Warcraft. And the thing that I would pull out for teachers is that World of Warcraft is able to create authentic collaboration. You have dozens, if not hundreds of people working together for an actual goal that they have. In this case, they call it a raid. That means you're going to go battle another group. And we see groups of dozens, if not hundreds of people organizing themselves together in order to meet this goal. It's not just you go into a room and you press a button and keep pressing it as fast as you can to kill the enemy. When you have this many people battling, there's all these complex dynamics, these complex interactions in this combat. And players of this game commonly get together, set up websites, take measurements on what strategies work, model the best versions of their strategy, share those findings with other players, and seek peer review to make those models more accurate. The challenge is worth stepping to. The challenge is worth stepping up to. So the same student that's failing the math class is coming in here and doing modeling within Microsoft Excel. Another thing that games do really well, I have to pull from Rock Band. I think there's so many things it does really well. One of them is they do this thing about magnifying the identity. Has anyone learned how to play like piano or guitar and can remember what that was like? It's pretty disappointing. You know, you listen to these CDs and then you pick up a guitar and you make these horrible sounds. The feedback you get and the identity you get from it is horrible. You immediately feel like a bad musician. It's not anything like what you enjoy about music when you're learning how to play guitar the first time. Now, one of the interesting things about Rock Band is it takes a scene of people that look like this, and I've been to these nerdy, does that word translate well? Like nerd? I've been at these nerdy parties. And even though that's what you look like, this is what you feel like. It's bigger. It's more rock star. Now, while this is playing, though, I want to pull out some of the things that are happening here, and I can see that this is a little blurrier than I would like. The background scene is that of a huge club, and the crowd is cheering, and you do a little bit of input. You know, you're just playing along a little bit, and it takes what you do and amplifies it. It takes the couple drum beats that you hit and turns it into the whole rhythm. Now, if you miss a beat, it stops. So it's not doing it for you. It's magnifying, it's amplifying what you put in. And by doing so, not only does it kind of teach you, as we're seeing in, well, specifically the drums and vocal, not only does it teach you how to do those things better, but it allows you to take on the identity of a rock star, just for a minute. It's not just the skill, it's the identity that it magnifies. And that's what makes it fun. Now, we also go to games like this, like Civilization. How many people are playing this or have played this? Yeah, there we go. This is certainly one of the better games that's ever been made. Because what's so interesting about Civilization is that it's really complicated. Like, really complicated. This game is so big that it takes hundreds, if not thousands of hours to really understand how to play it. In schools, often we do the opposite. We make things simpler and simpler and simpler. And we reduce things down to simple facts, like those flip cards. Civilization does the opposite. It takes something very complicated and then it lets you play with it, well, lets you play with that complicated thing, slowly. When you first get started, there's only a few things you can do. As your simulation gets, or civilization gets bigger, you have more and more options, it gets more and more complicated. It allows you to interact with a very complicated simulation. This is, for example, the tech tree, as they call it. These are what technologies lead to other technologies. And you can see that what I'm showing here is this one little part of the whole game. It says if you adopt ironworking and you also adopt a monotheistic religion, it allows democracy to take place, right? These are the assumptions in the game. And to be good at this game, you have to learn these things. I want to go back to Rock Band here because this is something that teachers can learn as well. I'm going to pick these words apart. It gives lots of feedback, not just a test at the end. It doesn't give you feedback every hour or every week or every semester. It gives you feedback all the time, but it does it in these unique ways. First off, it's multimodal. The feedback is coming through sound, through numerous visuals here. In the short term, we have you hit the right note by this little fire. How you're performing as a team over here. The idea of points, which is every time you hit a good note, you get a couple points. And if you do so in a row, you get this ×8, this magnifier. There's at least 10 different types of feedback that are happening the whole time. But the feedback is happening in this formative way. If you mess up, you're not out, you don't get a bad grade, it's just a mistake along the way. And the way that it gives you feedback is contextual. It doesn't give you, the primary mode of feedback for Rock Band, well, you can guess this, is rock. You're not being rewarded with grades for studying music. You're rewarded with music for studying music. The thing is the reward itself. And that's something that sometimes we don't do as teachers. We reward the thing with something else. We don't reward biology with biology itself. Find the beauty in biology. We make these things up. And then I didn't know that Angry Birds was from Helsinki, so I feel very honored to be among you, because I also feel that Angry Birds teaches us a really big thing about education, and that is we can do small investments that add up. It seems like everything that we do is in hour-long chunks, but Angry Birds, this is one of the great things about it, you can play it for 45 seconds and have that be a little bit of progress. So I'm going to show you a couple other scenes. One of the ones I think that's interesting is from this old game, Tetris. And I'm going to show a quick clip of exactly how effective games can be for changing the way your mind actually works. So I'm going to show you an expert Tetris player, and I will show you things that are not humanly possible, unless you play this much. This is coming out really blurry, but I'm going to try it anyway. So he's getting started. On this side, you can see his hands. I don't know why it's so blurry, but these are his hands moving. You can see how quickly his movements are. On this side, you can see what's happening. Okay, so my brain is not capable of processing that much visual information. And I'm gonna go in a little bit. And a little bit more. You understand he's actually rewired the way his brain works in order to do this. He's not thinking about this. It's an actual different ability that's been gained. By this point, the game doesn't even give you the visual. He's remembering where those pieces are at that speed. So I find this really interesting because what we're seeing in that is not only what someone thinks about being changed, but how they think, what they see, how they process information. They've actually rewired the mind. So I'm going to show you very quickly a couple of games I've done in about 2 minutes. And then in the latter session, we'll get into location-based games. The first game that I worked on that I think really worked was a board game. So I was really happy to hear Nicola talk about non-video games. It teaches a topic called the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen moves through the atmosphere in all these complicated ways. It has really nasty chemistry associated with it, and it's really important. We started by modeling that whole thing on whiteboards, and then we built this card game. This is what the board looks like for that. We have cards that allow you to see who does what within the system. So bacteria, for example, process nitrogen. We have resources of the things that they work on, and we have events that happen within the nitrogen cycle. We played this with a few hundred people now, from youth, like 10 and 13-year-olds, all the way up to people that study the nitrogen cycle professionally. And we tested them in these ways. We had them draw how they think the nitrogen cycle worked before and after playing the game. And we see a lot of feedback like this. Before playing the game, that was the answer. After playing the game for 40 minutes, we see things like this. Or here was someone that started with a little bit of understanding of the nitrogen cycle and then moved into a much more complicated version of it. And what we're seeing from all this feedback is across age and previous background, because the game mimics reality, it's a simulator, anybody at any level can learn something from it. The game is even teaching, these are professors, about what the nitrogen cycle is, because it allows them to play with the nitrogen cycle and try things that you never would normally play. And as you can see, we stole the whole idea from Magic: The Gathering, the card game design. One other one that I'm going to show you as I wrap up here is a game that teaches engineering at a graduate level. So these are older people learning about cryogenic engineering. This is the science of getting things really cold. This is a scene from the game. What you're doing is maximizing the materials that are used and the cooling system that are used in order to meet a bunch of engineering goals. But we're able to borrow from kind of professional video games by getting you involved with this through kind of a magnified identity or an authentic challenge. And I'm going to play a scene from that game to show you how you get started.
NASA is looking for your help to design a cryogen depot that can be launched into orbit and used for refueling various kinds of spacecraft. For this to be achieved, the cryogenic liquid, such as liquid hydrogen or liquid oxygen, must be kept below its boiling point by minimizing the heat leak. A crucial feature in the thermal design of the depot is that the liquid is held within an internal vessel, which is thermally isolated as much as possible from the outer surrounding vessel. Struts connecting the two vessels must support the weight of the internal vessel and its liquid payload against the 4G forces that are encountered during liftoff. They also must inhibit heat flow from the warm outer vessel to the cooled internal vessel. In addition, a cryocooler, which runs from the power generated by two large solar panels, is connected to the internal vessel. Your job is to select the struts and cryocooler to prevent any boil-off, which would rupture the vessel and be disastrous.
So in this example, for engineers, getting to work on something like this is the equivalent of being a rock star. We give them the really big problem that everybody really wants, and we put them within an actual challenge where they have to solve it authentically. Now, one of the great things we get with a video game is we get to make mistakes. So we call this kind of mediated results. In one of the challenges, if you mess up, this is what you see. And in another one, you see this. So in video games, one of the things that we get to do is magnify all the input. We get to show you failure without you having to actually die or pay for it. And one of the things that always gets the discussion started when I'm working with subject experts is to say, we have to have death on the table. We have to have these big things on the table as ways that we can design it, because games allow you to experience things like that and not have the consequences. We get to magnify the output that's happening. So these are just a few really short examples of a few games that I've been involved in building that are educational, but I hope the lesson that comes through here is that sometimes what we're trying to pull from games is what they already do very well. And I would love to see more teachers just play games and think about why it is they're playing games, what it is that the game they're playing does really well, and then try to mimic that kind of behavior back in their classrooms. So I'm going to leave it there, and then we'll get to talk a little bit more later. So thank you.